Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my Helldivers 2 follow-up review. I kind of threatened that I'd do something like this because the first one was pushed out with only really a few hours under my belt, but more importantly, since then, I've gone on to establish a couple of standards to the way that I review, standardizing things. So all the games that I've reviewed this year are going to get this sort of brief touch-up treatment. So this is not exactly going to be an extensive review. It's a bit of a retread, but I will be doing this over the course of time as I have spare time to catch up. Effectively, when I play games, and I started this last year reviewing, for every $5 a game asks Australian, I want to play it for an hour, kind of minimum. Beyond that is beyond the scope of the professional standard, but by doing that I can then seed these games into an actual percentile review system. It's still early days. I've only put 2 games into it, so the score system looks a bit strange. This is something that's going to take a year in full to really bear fruit. The idea being 100 games reviewed in a year, 100-point review scale, will actually get something that's useful, as opposed to like 4 or 5 stars or 7 out of 10. I don't know about you, but the idea of giving, 50 games in a year 7 out of 10, that doesn't really help me. Doesn't help you. So look, for the moment, at the time of this recording, this being the 3rd one going in the system, it's 10 out of 10, which to say it's the top 1 out of 3. As much as I've enjoyed both Deep Rock and Skull and Bones, this is very much above both of them. So we'll track over the year. The thumbnails will change dynamically, so as things rise and fall in the charts, I guess you can't go above 10, can you? I'll update them over time, so we'll see where this ends up come year's end. But it's already an early contender for a very high seat. That I can tell you in these early days. It might sit in this slot for a while. So yeah, Helldivers is going for $60 Australian, $59.95, which by my math is 12 hours, which I've done that. More than that. Has my position changed since I actually reviewed it straight out of the gate? Because that was an overview, but I called it a review because I was pretty confident the game wasn't going to really change. I was already pretty chuffed about it, as it were, that I could render a verdict, and honestly, that doesn't change. The game is brilliant fun. It seems a lot of the performance issues people were suffering have been rectified. However, there's a new wave of issues in that the game is kind of suffering under its popularity. This weekend, for example, people are having a really hard time getting into the server, and the developers and publisher are desperately trying to scale up at speed. So this is an awesome problem to have, and I'm sympathetic to those that want to play it and can't get in, but at the same time, this is a network performance issue for a game that was not expected to blow out this hard. That is blowing out. Just having a look at the numbers anyway, it's on way, actually it looks like it's already hit its 24-hour peak at around 330,000 concurrent players. So it's actually at this building stage that you saw with Pal World, where it's breaking its peak hand over fist, which is kind of the sign of a viral breakout hit. Most games will, they'll hit their peak early and then they'll sort of peter off, and some people will farm bloody clickbait off you and say the game's dying or whatever, but this has been the life cycle of games forever, right? There's the hype train at the beginning and then there's drop off. So it's cool to see a hit like this just go on hammer and tongs. For reference, Pal World's the big dog. That's been like the unusual blowout success, though, I think people can tell why. Like, it's not that unusual, but it did Swiss cheese, and I think a huge part of it has to do with timing as well. It released when it was the only dog. I'm not trying to take this away from Pal World, but it just ticked all the boxes in a time where gamers are a little bit, they're a bit down on the state of gaming. And Pal World catered to, a want, a need, an intent. Anyway, I don't want to make this a Pal World video, but just looking at the numbers there, like, it's doing current numbers about the same as Helldivers. 380,000, that sort of thing. I mean, its 24-hour peak was still over 500,000, and its all-time is 2 million. So, they're not quite in the same conversation, but Helldivers 2 is the closest contender to Pal World that there is. So this should give you perspective. on how well it's being received, and how if you've got mates that can't log in, that's why, because it's just exploding. And we'll see how it goes going into the week on the back of this. But yeah, look, broadly, you can check out my previous review, and I laid out a lot of stuff I don't really need to retread. The gameplay loop is still solid, still holding up. I've unlocked a shitload of upgrades, weapons, whatever you want to say, like your actual core weapon kit, like your machine guns or shotguns, that sort of stuff. They're in what is effectively a twist on the battle pass, and that hands out currency at a fairly reasonable rate. So it's not strictly a free battle pass that's level locked. It is a battle pass that you chip away with in-game currency. There is a paid one as well on top of it, and a lot of my friends picked it up because, generally speaking, the way that this model is being done is fairly reasonable. But beyond that, you have the more traditional unlocking system as well, where you're getting these points requisitions. You can upgrade your ship, albeit very slowly, and you can upgrade sort of your special airdrop weapons. And that ranges from, like dropping bloody bombs on the enemy and turrets, that sort of stuff, and into things I find more interesting. Sort of like your two-man weapon team backpack systems. I unlocked a thing, it's called a guard dog. It seems more catered for someone that's running light. Maybe it's only two of you in the run and you haven't been backfilled, and you have this bot that sort of acts as an AI roaming gun that helps look after you. For my part, I haven't had any performance issues or anything like that. I'm starting to really push the difficulties up. I'm versing the new faction, which is interesting how people, misremember, like myself included. There were 3 factions in the original game, and this is kind of similar to one of the original factions, I believe. God, it has been so long. But at least in the lore, in the log files, reading how this is like set 100 years later and it's a new faction. I mean, look, if the game's telling me it's a new faction, I'm going to take its word for it, but it's very much a Terminator 2 future T-800 faction. Another, basically fanboy faction. The first one is clearly the bugs from Starship Troopers, and these dudes, where the current campaign is focused, so, most of my footage is going to be focused on that this time around as opposed to the bugs, is fighting, the dudes from the intro to Terminator 2. Another pipe dream for all the lads from my time period that are hooked on Starship Troopers. We all love Terminator 2 as well, so it's totally appropriate. One thing that's interesting, because I've unlocked really high difficulties grinding the bugs and learning how they work and that sort of thing. It's very deep end fighting the Terminator bots on the other side. They have freaking AT walkers, they have tanks, they have all sorts of crazy stuff. It's cool, but it's very, very different. So I sort of went back to lower difficulties and eased my way in, trying to figure out the lay of it. But yeah, I nearly had nearly doubled over when I saw a frigging, what looked like a Warhammer 40,000 tank having a run at me. I was like, well, that seems a little bit unfair for me and my little shotgun. People did point out that apparently the walkers were teased in a trailer or something like that. That was the big gotcha of my review. To which I go, hey, look, I'm glad. Look, if people want walkers and they're bringing walkers, that's cool. I did focus in on the fact that I kind of think the depowering is a better focus. I'm not walking this back, but if popular demand wants walkers in it, and I suppose vehicles eventually, right? Sure, fill your boots. I just feel that they were kind of the weakest part of the first game. I really do. There was a point where your weapons got a little bit too memey and a bit too powerful, when the entire core of this game is about how ridiculously paper thin and kind of depowered you are, and the nonsense difficulty that you go up against. And I think every time you put a superpower balancing the scales weapon or car or bloody walker bot into it for the good guys, it diminishes that a little bit. So yeah, I didn't realize that. I hadn't seen that trailer, I guess, or the teaser at the end of it. Thought I'd address it because there were a few comments bringing it up. Something else I didn't really touch on, like the D-pad thing, I don't know what else to call it, where you bring your stratagems in. It's sort of like a combo thing. It actually works really well with just keyboard. It's clearly brought across from console. It was something developed in the first game. It hasn't changed or anything like that, but it works really well with your WASD. Like, I was surprised. I thought it would be, because it's clearly a ported idea from a thumbstick design principle. It works really well on keyboard, to the point where you start muscle memorying a lot of the moves, especially reinforce other goobers that have decided to get themselves killed. I've gotten pretty good at that. But the other thing is like the mini missions that you're doing are really, really quite charming and varied enough at the moment. Sometimes you're rescuing dudes and you're escorting them from a very small point A to point B. Other times you're loading up like artillery sites, which can then be used as a stratagem for that mission. Same goes for like aligning satellite dishes that will then show you where all the side missions are. And then today, actually, I launched a bloody nuke to one side of the planet, and that went off, and that was pretty good, and I gave it a salute, as you probably should. But anyway, look, this is as much as an update, a touch base, and standardizing this game and review into my new system. You'll see this come up for a couple of the games that I've played previously. Pal World comes to mind. We obviously covered that. But other things that under my system, God help me, I am going to give them the appropriate amount of hours, because that's the point of a standard, is to be standardized. This means I'm probably going to go back and play a bit more Suicide Squad despite myself. Even though I clocked it and I put something 12, 13 hours, something like that in. The price tag demands I put another couple more hours in. So I guess we'll see what the end game is. I very much doubt it's going to redeem it, but I want to be consistent. If I've got a system, I need to stick with it. Another one that comes to mind is Stargate as well. I only played that for a couple of hours and then passed judgment, and since then, having games like Suicide Squad come in, which I still stand by the fact that the narration and the structure of that game being aimed at bringing low Western cultural icons, I still think that's reprehensible, but it does make me look at the Stargate thing and go, well, it's not like there's ill will there. The Stargate game, for those that missed it, and I don't want to get too off track, it's inexplicably, it's a genre of game that just does not make any sense or gel with Stargate at all. And it seems like the most missed opportunity on the planet. But just because they missed the mark doesn't mean I shouldn't give it its fair shake. So I'm going to go back at some point and I'll review that. I'll put more hours into that and potentially, well, at least reseed it in the ranking and see where it stands. Anyway, Helldivers, it's brilliant. Everyone's playing it. You should be playing it. At the time of this review, I'm giving it a 10 out of 10, 100. But, come December this year, let's see where it sits. All right, might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.